Hi, I'm Jeremy, the Zoo Nerd. Sorry for a late delay today. Had some connection issues with the internet. But here we are going live for Critter Chat number 15. Now what this means is that Zoo Nerd has been officially going for 2 weeks now, which I hope that makes you guys happy. It certainly makes me happy. If you've missed any of the episodes, there's now been, this is episode 15 of Critter Chat. So check back on any episodes you may have missed on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, where all episodes can live in full versions on YouTube and Facebook, with additional information, of course, being shared on the Facebook profile as well. I'd also like to encourage you to share Zoo Nerd with your family, friends, and others who may enjoy these posts. It's here for everyone to enjoy and maybe learn something in this weird time we're living in. Today you may also see one of my little dogs walking around. She just passed behind us on the screen. They're outside enjoying some sun with me today, so you may see the dogs in and out as we go through. But we're going to talk today about one of my all-time favorite animals, the bison. Bison have long been in my top 5 favorite animals, and there's a lot of good reasons why. To start off with, I'm going to first mention that there are 2 distinct species of bison. One in North America that is commonly referred to as bison by the scientific community. That is their scientific name. They are a member of the Bovidae, or the bovine family. That includes cows and other wild cattle-like species across the globe. And there is another species of bison that lives in Europe called the wisnet. And wisnets are very endangered. I have had the opportunity to see one, and in the photos I shared earlier today, it's a bison in the first photo from North America in the wild. That photo was taken in Yellowstone National Park, and the second photo was of a wisnet taken at the Zoo Berlin Tierpark in eastern Berlin, where they have a nice breeding population in their zoo there. But we're going to talk a bit about bison. We're going to talk a lot about the human interference with the bison population in both North America and in Europe, because humans have had a huge interaction and toll on these species, and we're going to talk a bit about that today. To start off with, bison are huge animals. Males in the North American species, at least, can get to be about 6'5" at the shoulder, so that's at their tallest point. Their heads hang a little lower, and that big hump on their back is actually the tallest point of them. So 6.5 feet tall. That's taller than I am, although I'm sitting down today. That's a very large animal. They can also weigh a ton, which is 2,000 pounds. Very big guys. The females are a bit smaller, but they are also still very large animals. Females top out about 5 feet tall on their shoulders, and about 1,000 pounds for a good sized female. Bison can live about 12 to 15 years in the wild, and in a captive setting, possibly as long as 20. They would live a little longer in captive settings like a zoo or maybe a ranch or a farm, because they get veterinary care. They don't have to deal with the elements as much, like winter, and they wouldn't have predators and also get medical care. All right, let's try this again. Sorry about that. We're having connection issues today with internet. Maybe this new positioning will help us a little better. So as we were talking about bison, they are very large animals. They are also very fast animals. They've clocked bison going around 35 miles an hour with a run, and that's a whole lot of big animal coming at you very fast. That's faster than any people can run, for sure. They are also strong swimmers. I've been able to watch this in Yellowstone as bison have swam across rivers of pretty good size and with pretty strong currents, and they are very adept to their environment. They also have really strong senses including excellent hearing, excellent vision, and a strong sense of smell. Now with those, they definitely use their senses to navigate their world and to watch out for anything that may be potential threat to them, to their babies, or just if they're a little cranky, they want some more space. And I would definitely encourage you to never approach a bison. They are not a cow. They are not going to be nice to you. They may hold still. They may even stand in a position close to you for a photo. They may also toss you into a tree or kill you with their sharp horns, big heads, and strong hooves. So please do not ever approach a bison. I have seen people get charged. It is not fun. Don't do it. Bison, before Europeans arrived in North America, numbered between 50 and 60 million animals on the plains of what is now the United States and Canada. They stretched as far east as Buffalo, New York. That's how it got its name. Oh, also bison are often called buffalo. I'm going to refer to them as bison because that is the term that science uses to talk about them, but buffalo is commonly used to describe them as well. So they lived from about Buffalo, New York on the eastern side all the way to the Pacific Ocean in the west. They ranged all the way down into Texas and parts of Arizona and New Mexico, all the way up through Canada and into Alaska. So they had a huge home range, and before the Europeans arrived, there were many, many millions of them. Between 50 and 60 million animals is what they estimate. That could be the largest population of a grazing animal anywhere in the world at that time, any large mammal. By the 1860s, the United States was experiencing the Civil War and also building of a railroad. And so both those things kind of took its toll on the bison, especially in the eastern part of their range. Many of them were hunted for food, for their hides, which could be used to make rugs or insulation or clothing, and definitely for their meat. As the Civil War ended and the railroad expansion continued, that definitely started to hamper the bison population, and it gave people a lot more accessibility into the territory where bison lived on the Great Plains. Now, the U.S. government also encouraged some of this hunting of bison in their efforts to try to push the Native American people onto reservations. Now, that's a whole different topic to be dealt with another day, another time, and probably not by me. I'm not the best historian, but I am aware of that being an effort. And for that, the U.S. government sent the Army at times to hunt bison, to eliminate them as a food source for the Native Americans so that they could push the Native Americans onto reservations. It's kind of crazy, the different things that people did without realizing the impacts they could have on other people, on animals, and on ecosystems. By 1875, there were no bison south of the railroad, of the Union Pacific Railroad line. And by 1885, most of the herd north of the railroad was gone as well. By 1889, they estimate that there were less than 1,000 individuals left. And shortly after that, Teddy Roosevelt, who, though he had some flaws of his own, was a great conservationist. And he decided to step in with some other people who had some money and some power. And they created a conservation society in efforts to try to save the bison. One of the ways that they did that is they created something called the New York Zoological Society, which later became the Bronx Zoo. And they've created the world's first captive bison population in North America, in which they brought some bison from the western states where they could find a few and started breeding them in a zoo setting. And through that, they were able to also encourage several landowners out in the west to set aside some land for bison. And as their herd in New York grew, they started to bring some of those back. One of their first translocations of baby bison born in the zoo setting back into the west was into Oklahoma, for the Indian Territory and for the reservations there. Now, during this time, there was a remnant population that survived in Yellowstone National Park. And as Yellowstone National Park was set aside as a protected space and the U.S. Army was given the charge to protect that, they protected the bison from poachers. Now, that population in Yellowstone got down into the 20s of individual animals, so not very many at all. But they remained some of the last truly wild bison in North America, as well as a population that remained up in Canada. Through those populations began to grow, and over the many years they have grown quite a bit. Today the population of bison in Yellowstone, when they did their census in late 2019, was 4,980 individuals. It usually gets right around 5,000 at its peak before winter every year. There are bison in other places as well. I know that there's a National Bison Refuge in Montana. That is a big protected area where bison are allowed to roam. There's about 250 to 300 animals there. They also are in several other national and state parks in a lot of places in the western United States and on definitely some of the Indian reservations throughout the country as well. Now, bison, they live in a social herd that is usually led by an adult female who is kind of the older female. She kind of calls the shot for the herd. So that's kind of similar to elephants if you think about it. She kind of has the knowledge of where food may be, where water may be, and where to go at different times of the year to find the best grass. They will wander in search of good grass for quite a bit. That is the thing that they eat. That's why I'm standing now with my grass behind me to talk about the bison and their love of grass. Bison usually breed in August. That is a tremendous time to watch bison in the wild. I highly recommend doing that. If you're interested in seeing some wild bison, go to Yellowstone National Park in August. You will see bison, and you will see them during their breeding season, which is also called the rut. During that time, the bull bison, or the boys, the males, they get very defensive. They get very argumentative with each other to kind of secure a big group of females that they would like to try to breed with. And during that time, there's a lot of running around, snorting, pushing, head charging. It's a very exciting time in the world of bison, and it's exciting to watch, although it is a heightened state of energy among them, and you need to be extra careful, and for sure don't approach them in late July or throughout the month of August. Baby bison are born in May. When they're born, they are kind of a reddish brown color. That helps them to stand out very, very obviously against the green grass. And that's kind of so that the herd can kind of keep a good eye on where the babies are. And they will work together to kind of protect the babies. Once the babies are a couple days old, they'll kind of put the babies in a group, although babies will stay close to their moms as well. And they can try to defend their babies from predators, and they are usually very good at doing so. The babies can stand within 40 minutes to an hour of being born, and within a couple of days they can run with the herd, which is very important and good for baby bison. Usually once they are a month or two old, they're in a pretty good safe place as long as they stay with the herd. Now, if they and their mom get separated from the herd, then the baby may fall prey to a predator species like wolves or a bear or possibly a mountain lion, although that's pretty rare. What else? They are very social animals, so they communicate with each other through a series of different communications. The males make a very loud bellow sound during the mating ritual. That's both to kind of challenge other males to come and fight with them, or also to proclaim territory and say, hey, this is my space, don't come over here unless you want to fight. And they are pretty loud when that's going on. They also make typical cow-like sounds of snorts and grunts. You'll hear that often in the summer as they move throughout their space. Now, they are also well adapted to living in the very cold and snowy conditions of the American West. They have very huge heads, and they have a very large shoulder muscle mass right behind their head that kind of gives their head a lot of power and mobility. And they'll use their big head, swing it side to side to clear the snow off of the grass during the wintertime so that they can find food. I've seen them do that. I visited Yellowstone in the wintertime. It's an amazing time to watch them move across their landscape. Although they are huge animals, they are very well insulated from the cold. You'll oftentimes see bison with snow stuck to their hair, but because of their thick coat and their very large body size and the density of their coat, they can stay pretty warm, on the inside at least, in those snowy and cold conditions. So switching gears, we're going to talk a little bit about their European cousins, the Windsit. And they look fairly similar. When I saw them in the zoo in Berlin, they actually had the European species on one side and the North American species right next to each other. And it was really awesome to be able to see them so close together to really compare and contrast them. The European species is a bit taller. They definitely have longer legs. They're less shaggy, and they have a bit smaller heads. I guess that is probably due to the way they evolved to live in Europe. Maybe they don't have to deal with snow as much to push around those big snow piles. Now this species is has had an interesting run with people as well, but their problems began much earlier. They used to historically live in many places in Europe. Some of first human record of life includes cave paintings, and that includes paintings of bison. If you look back at any of those images, you will see bison prominently featured in many of the first human cave settlements. The archaeologists believe were some of the first human settlements and some of the first recorded history by cave paintings. Now, as Europe is a very long established human area, bison were eliminated from much of that range many hundreds of years ago. Although two populations existed into the 1900s, some in the Caucasus Mountains of Russia and some in a very special forest preserve in Poland. Now, the king in Poland had set aside this forest preserve back in the 1600s as a very special place, and he actually put laws in place that the bison that lived there, the Windsit, that they were protected species. And he did a lot to try to help them and to make sure that they survived. And they did a really good job of surviving until World War I. Wars have a tough toll on wildlife. During wartime, sometimes soldiers get very desperate for food. Sometimes soldiers get very bored. And during that time, there were soldiers in that forest in Poland and definitely in the Caucasus Mountains of Russia. And the Russian population was wiped out during World War I. And the population in the forest in Poland went from about 600 individuals down to about 10 individuals by the end of World War I. And when that happened, the government in Poland decided to round up what they could and put them in zoos and try to save them. And the European zoo community was pretty good at making sure that that could successfully happen. In 1932, they began the European Bison Pedigree Book. And it was a book of each individual Windsit that was left in any of the zoos, who it was related to, who its mom and dad were, if it had any babies, where it came from, and where it currently lived, and if it was currently breeding or not. So they kept track of all those records since 1932, and that book is still published every year up through now, through current time. And because of that, they set the precedent of documenting animal record keeping that is still used very, very well in zoos across the world. Today, that exists in something we call species survival programs, where they keep very detailed records of the genetics of which animals are related to who, and they will share those as a community between different zoos. So if the zoo in Berlin had three bison and they had 2 babies that year, maybe they would trade with the zoo in Paris, who also had 2 babies that year, and that way they could trade those 2 babies back and forth when the babies got older, and they could keep the genetics a little cleaner and increase the population and share those animals with each other. And that early process of saving the Winsent in zoos in 1930s in Europe became a big precedent of how to save animals in a zoo setting that is still used. And similarly, in America, the same sort of thing was happening with the North American bison, started by the Bronx Zoo or the New York Zoological Society. They learned from their European cohorts that if they kept the records and kept good genetics, they could manage the population in a very good way and help save those animals. And today that is used by zoos, like I said, across the world. And it's very successful. I've been involved in species survival plan meetings, and it's amazing the details and the specifics that they record, and also how detailed and particular they get in trading animals back and forth between zoos. It's really a great system, and it's big thanks to those early conservationists who set in place those processes. Now, speaking of conservationists and bison, there was something that happened a few years ago in 2016 where a group of different conservation organizations got together and they started working with some of their local populations because the United States did not have an official mammal. We have our official national bird, which is the bald eagle, which I'll talk about in a future episode, but we did not have a national mammal. And these conservation organizations felt that that should be the bison. And so they worked with some of the politicians to create legislation that could put that in place. And it was one of the rare opportunities in US politics where both parties agreed on things and they worked together to make that happen. And in the spring of 2016, President Obama signed into law that the bison was now the official national mammal of the United States. And that is a big shout out to all those people who were involved in making that happen, but also a good recognition of the importance of this animal on the settling of the country, and also as kind of a apology to the Native Americans and the importance of the bison to them. Bison are great animals. I've watched them for countless hours in many states. My favorite place to see them is Yellowstone National Park because it's a good place to see them. You would have a hard time to go to Yellowstone without seeing a bison, although I do know some people that have had that happen. But if you spend a few days there, it's very Yellowstone is struggling today. So hopefully that connected. So a special shout out to Yellowstone National Park. I'll also be sharing some more information about bison up on the Facebook page later today and uploading the full episode of this Critter Chat on YouTube and Facebook. I encourage you to like, follow, subscribe, and share the content for Zoo Nerd. And we're also going to be starting something new at Zoo Nerd. That's a community page where those of you who watch regularly or who tune in to catch some of the little tidbits that I share on Facebook can also share some of your thoughts, your insights. And if you're following along, doing homework assignments or reports or have photos to share, this will be a place where you can share them. So look for the Zoo Nerd community group launching later today on Facebook. But until tomorrow, I hope you take care of yourself, stay safe, and be happy. Have fun. We'll see you. Goodbye.